So the poets fill in the rest. The Hebrew people, the Abraham stories, and so on, some of which may be based on folk memory, some on something else, some on David's experience. I don't know what they're all based on, and they're not that many. But this is real. I mean, real from whatever period it was. So there was a person called Abram the Hebrew. I'm sure of that, just from this year. And he was called the Hebrew. I'm fairly sure of that too. Okay? Just from looking at this in a literary critical manner. Like these things. and Abraham came back after the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings at his side and so on and so forth. I mean, these names come out of space, as it were. There's no description who they are, what their background is, where they came from, so on and so forth. That's where you get real history, and it's not poetry, see, because it's crappy poetry. Doesn't even read well. It's a newspaper clipping from that time, or a commemorative clipping shortly thereafter. And so that's a really story. Okay, but the stories about Abraham, I don't know. So the stories about Abraham take us down through the next narrowing bit. Jacob's children who get a name change, Israel. And I told you about that last time because Israel comes to be the name of the northern kingdom. Jacob, the southern grandchild of Abraham, becomes Israel as far as the northerners are concerned. The stories, again, coalesce, if you want to call it that. So, after Israel, we're dealing with the sons of Israel, the Israelites. So we've got the Shemites, the Hebrews. Israelites are Hebrews, but not all Hebrews are Israelites. All Israelites are Hebrews, but not all Hebrews are Israelites. There's lots of other groups in the Hebrew stories that we heard who are not necessarily sons of Israelites. So we narrow down to Israelites. That will reflect a period certainly after David or around the time of David when the northern kingdom breaks away. Now how long the Israelites were called Israelites, I don't know. But in the Moses stories, you see, Jacob's son Joseph ends Genesis. We then get Exodus, which is the Moses stories. So in the Moses stories, the Exodus from Egypt stories, when Israelites talk to each other, they call themselves Israelites. When outsiders like Egyptians talk about them, they don't know the term Israelite in the story. They call them Hebrews. So to outsiders, the Israelites are Hebrews, and insiders, they're Israelites. I can't go any deeper than that. I can tell you one quick thing about that. What do scholars think the name Hebrew really comes from? Habiru, right. There was a term that pops up in all ancient texts in many languages that is either, I don't know if their pronunciation is correct, because they're only hoping they got it. Habiru, I think, in Egyptian text, Apiru in Mesopotamian text. And it is a reference to a class of rootless outsiders who are inhabiting the edges of settled life and desert. They can't go deep into the desert yet. I think I told you that last time. If I didn't, why can't they go deep into the desert yet? They don't have the camel. Now we have camels in these stories here, but almost all scientists, I don't know if it's true or not, say that the camel was not domesticated until around 1000 BC. And the difference then, according to scholars, between an Arab and a Hebrew is the difference between a donkey and a camel. You can laugh. The camel made it possible to go into the deep desert. We don't get Arabs here yet. Arabs pop in the Job stories, which is around 600 BC. It's the first mention of Arabs in the Old Testament. We get pre-Arab tribal names, Midianites, Moabites, Ammonites. What's the capital today of Jordan? Ammon, after Ammonites. across Jordan. We get all these names. We don't have Arabs yet. Arabs come in with the camel. As the Arab poets basically say, the Arab is the tick of the camel. Now, Arabs today in Cairo, Baghdad, they're not really Arabs. Arabs, Bedouin today are what Arabs were yesterday. Today, the Arab will call the desert people the Bedouin, and they don't like them. They have contempt for them. They look down on them. They think, I live in Middle Eastern, urban centers. You speak to an Arab person, they say, oh, dirty Bedouin, they just basically spit on the most, filthy, you couldn't even want to be near one for them, like a Hindu untouchable in India. The point is that Arab, as the language spread, took over towns and villages and cities, and now most Arabs are where Arabic is spoken. An Arab is someone who speaks Arabic. And it may not be a genealogical Arab. That is where the language blankets the area. And where then, as you forget your ancestry, as I told you, you become an Arab because you speak Arabic. The Arabs even speak about Jewish Arabic, meaning Jews who speak Arabic from Middle Eastern countries, except that Europeans should go back to Europe. Well, we'll look at the DNA one day and we'll see how that works out. But the point is that, there's African tribes who have Hebrew DNA down in Nigeria and places like that.
That's where I'm from.
That's where you're from, so you know about these things. Yeah, it's incredible. They have the priestly marker from the temple. They went down into Uganda and down into Nigeria. There are groups down there who are clearly descendants. Yeah, quite amazing. So you understand how these things work. People get acculturated into different worlds. But DNA isn't going to lie about these things. And that to me is the greatest advance in historical knowledge in the next 100 years we can expect, I think, from DNA. And finding out who these peoples are, where they came from, who they're related to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so Bedouin are what Arabs were, and Arabs came into being around 700 BC as first we get historical references to them. Fine, I'm not against that, but I don't know if scholars are right, but they say the camel made it possible because the camel could go 30 days without water. And the Arab became like the tick of the camel. He could stick a stick down his throat and